a typical thing. The chief priests would be mainly Sadducees and the Pharisees, the kind of and then the Pharisees and the Herodians are going to get. These are like the political people and the religious people. They're coming to him because they may not normally have gotten along, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And if you look way back, I know we started Mark a long time ago, in chapter 3, Jesus heals a guy with a withered hand, and the religious leaders start getting together with the Herodians, going, what can we do about this guy? And that's kind of coming to the head now. And the common enemy is Jesus. It'd be like Democrats and Republicans working together during the shutdown. We'll leave it there. And so in verse 14 it says, "Teacher," they said, "we know how honest you are. You're impartial and don't play favorites. You teach the way of God truthfully. Now tell us, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or shouldn't we?" It's kind of funny because this is totally like flattery that's fake, isn't it? It's fake flattery. If they really thought these things about Jesus, they'd be his followers, right? Not just talking about it. And so flattery is interesting. It's like the reverse of gossip. Another free sermon. Gossip is you say behind their backs what you would never say to their face. Flattery, you would say to their face what you would never say behind their backs. So they're saying like, Jesus, we know you're so good. And it's ironic they're about to experience the truth through his teaching, even though maybe they don't believe it. It says, should we pay these taxes? Should we pay them or shouldn't we? Now, this is a form of a poll tax. It'd be 1 denarius, which is a day's wage. So if you take your weekly salary, you can do the math and figure out about what you make for a day. This is a tax. They'd lost a war. They were a Roman province. This was the price they paid for the privilege of being under Roman law, which they really didn't like. So they're paying a tax for something that they really didn't want, and they hated Roman rule, so they're being taxed for what they hated. Now, no one loves taxes, right? Anyone's like, except maybe the IRS. I was actually someplace and there was this baby choking and this guy runs over and he figures out what's going on and he shakes the baby and it goes the Heimlich and out pops a quarter. And we were all like, "That's amazing, you must be a doctor." He said, "No, I work for the IRS. Because they'll get a quarter out. Anyway, but the question becomes for them is, can you pay taxes to this unjust government? Remember, they're God's people. They were an independent nation, and sort of the history of mankind is taking over other countries and people. And if you study world history, this happens all the time. And so, we tend to think of the lines as drawn where they are for a long time, but country borders change. If you had a globe when I was a kid, it wouldn't even work today because country borders have changed. And so, can one pay taxes to Caesar and still give allegiance to the God of Israel? It's sort of this question, are people traitors for supporting Caesar's dominance over us? And maybe it's good parallels about maybe how people feel about politics today and taxes. Now, if he answers yes, then the zealots and many in Judea will turn against him because they're like, they want this political Messiah. They want somebody who's going to take over. And so if he says, yeah, pay taxes to Caesar, they got him because half the people will be upset. Now, if he answers no, then they can drag him before the Roman authorities and go, "Hey, this guy's saying don't pay taxes." And so they think they have Jesus in a good question. Remember, Jesus had them cornered with the last one, John's baptism, from man or God. And they think, we got Jesus on this one. We got this question, is it this or this? Now, and it's not because they wanted to have this conversation about, the role of government and taxes in the lives of believers. It's a trap. Those of you who are a Star Wars fan, it's a trap. Little Admiral Akbar stating the obvious that this is a trap. And so he's trying to get him pick one or two. It's like when you go to the eye doctor, he's like, 1 or 2, A or B. And but in this case, this is going to put him in a tough place. So whatever side, again, he takes is problematic. If he says lawful, no one wants to hang out with him. He'll lose his popularity because he doesn't oppose the Romans. If he says unlawful, then Rome will take care of things and take care of Jesus. So it's a conundrum. And so it says, Jesus saw through their hypocrisy and said, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the Roman coin and I'll tell you. Now, hypocrisy is this idea, we get the word from an actor. It's the Greek word for actor. That's where we get the word hypocrite. It's like they would literally physically hold up masks and like, now I'm this guy. And so it's like the putting on the one face or the other. And so they're putting on this face of asking Jesus a pious question, but they're really trying to trap him. It says, now show me a Roman coin. Now the tax needed to be paid in a Tiberian denarius. So Jesus basically, he's saying, show me the money. Come on, little Jerry Maguire. Show me the money. Now, anyone here have a coin today? No one wants to say. I brought one just in case no one would have one. So picture I get this from Bob. We're low budget today. I don't have a denarius. I have a quarter. And so on this quarter, Jesus says, hey, anybody got the money? And so when they handed it to them, he asked whose picture and title are stamped on it. And in our case, it would be whose picture. You can't see this from here. Y'all know you can't. Even with your good glasses, you can't. But it's a quarter, so who's on there? George Washington. If I had like $100 bill, you're like, I don't know who's on that. But the quarter, you're like, I've never seen one of those up close, only in movies. It's a guy named George Washington, right? And on the back, this one's like a state quarter or something. Normally you have the eagle thing, I can't tell what that is. Anyway, bad lighting in here. And Henry says, whose picture and title are stamped on it? Caesar's, they replied to him. And this is ironic because, you kind of wonder, it's like, it's building this tension. Jesus is like, hey, y'all got the money? And people are like, oh, do you have a denarius with you? And they kind of picture him quickly doing this. It's ironic because, they have this coin and Jesus doesn't, and we'll see why. Now, it's a Roman coin, and the inscription likely would have read, Tiberius Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Augustus. It would be blasphemous to the Jewish people to even have this kind of coinage. Because you remember, they're not allowed to have graven images. They're not. And so, and on the back it would have said, the coin likely this time would have been, the woman with peace, and it would have said high priest. Now, I don't give much thought about carrying a Washington quarter, right? I mean, usually I don't have it, but you have to have one in case you go to Aldi's. Because don't you hate that with the court? Get out, you always see people if you want to love some people to Jesus, stand outside Aldi's with a roll of quarters, because people get up there, they roll up, and they're like, oh man, I got a quarter, I can't get a cart. And then I think people always leave them there. I don't know if they're being nice or just don't know how to get the quarter back after you do that thing. And some of you know what I mean. Some of you have never shopped there. This sermon brought to you by Aldi's. So, he's got this Roman coin. We don't give much thought about it, but in that day, it would have been thought of like portable idolatry. Having this in your pocket, not a real pious thing, but someone has it. And Jesus says, well then, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And I picture him pausing there. And they're thinking, we got him. And then he says, and give to God what belongs to God. Now, more common, you might hear it in your head as, ESV renders it. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And his answer, it's interesting because it's he's saying, hey, you can either pay the tax or reject Caesar by giving it back to him what is his. Jesus kind of saying, give back to Caesar the idols you already have in your pocket. He made it, give it back to him. And it says his reply completely amazed them. And I think the image I have of this is like they're sitting there with their mouths open, right? They're like, oh, yeah, he got us again. Jesus' kingdom is ultimately, it's not a violent revolution, which is what people were hoping. There were a lot of people probably hoping Jesus would say, don't pay the taxes, let's get the Romans. But Jesus' kingdom it offers this whole different way about confronting evil. It's about bold love. It's about turning the other cheek when someone offends you. It's about going the extra mile when forced to go the first mile. It's about forgiving enemies and praying for them. It's about giving one's life for the other. It's not this political kingdom. Jesus rejects this sort of militant nationalism, but does not propose his followers drop out completely from society. And that's the tension of faith, is we're to be, in the world and not of the world. We're supposed to live in the nation as good citizens, but we offer our allegiance to God. And Jesus doesn't tell them not to have anything to do with the government. He doesn't tell them to go off in the wilderness. And some of you have heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That was the Qumran community, and they lived off in caves and outside the city and kind of separated themselves. He didn't say go join that and go out in the desert. But here, the bigger issue Jesus is talking about, though, is where our real loyalty lies. Now, that brings us to a question about, what about Christians and government? I'd say today is tumultuous political times. I don't know. I've only lived this life. But I imagine that throughout history, people have thought we live in odd political times. And there's often things, it's interesting. I went to a church one time where somebody got a hold of one of the party registries and figured out who in the church was in that party and was complaining to the leadership and naming people. It was weird. If you want to do that, I don't care. I'm not going to listen to you very long. But the truth is, we all pick political sides. And I think we've had a contentious election. Some of you who maybe are affected by the shutdown, you have some thoughts on that. Fortunately, we have a lot of military folks, but that hasn't, their pay hasn't been an issue in this last one. But Christians and government, what's our relationship supposed to be? And so Romans 13 says this. It says, everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they will be punished. For authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing right, but those who are doing wrong. Would you like to live without fear of the authorities? Do what is right, and they will honor you. It's kind of like doing something you know is wrong, and you kind of are scared of getting caught by your parents when you're younger. Don't do that. You don't have to worry. Now I'm looking at the teens. No. The authorities are God's servants sent for you good, but if you do wrong, of course you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They're God's servants sent for the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong. So you must submit to them, not only to avoid punishment, but also to keep a clear conscience. Now here's the thing. Pay your taxes too for these same reasons. So you're wondering, as a Christian, should I pay taxes? I don't know. Seems pretty clear to me. Don't need a week-long sermon on that one. For the same reasons, for government workers need to be paid. Oh, man, that'll preach. That's a tough one right now, right? They are serving God in what they do. Give to everyone what you owe them. Pay your taxes and government fees to those who collect them, and give respect and honor to those who are in authority. Now, it's different all around the world, but in our case, we live in a democracy, and we vote for leaders. You don't have to love it, but honestly, if you're a believer, I believe you have to pay taxes. You don't cheat. I've literally heard people say, I don't have to pay because we're not of this world. I've had people who are pastors not pay their taxes, and now it's great because the government provides room and board for them for 20 years. And they didn't even have to pay for it because they didn't pay their taxes. I have friends who say, taxation is theft. I don't want to get into all the politics, but, hey, we're called to live in a peaceful society and things cost money. Now, yesterday I went to a wrestling match because Josh was wrestling. And when I went to a wrestling match, guess what I had to do? And we don't think anything about that. But, something has to pay for the electric. Something has to pay for all the things that happen at the event. And so you got to pay. And it's really, the tough thing, the weird thing about being a believer is, again, we're citizens of another world. We're just passing through. 1 Peter 2:11 calls us strangers and aliens. Some of you are stranger than others. Never mind. I hope we'll know you're aliens. But we have to live by the government's rules and stuff while we're here. When you travel to another country, sometimes I travel to other countries, and some of you have. It's interesting because you have to follow their rules, and they're not always the same as the U.S. And there's often very strict penalties for breaking some of those rules, and so you have to be careful. But when we travel to another country, we have to follow. We're under the rules, and that's where we are. You may not be a citizen of this world in a sense, spiritually, but we do have to, to live by the rules. I was talking with a friend one time, and they were talking about something the church wanted to do, and they said, well, the government can't tell the church what to do with their property. I assure you, they can and they will. You may not like it. You may at times fight it and protest against it, but they do. Now, I think this passage starts to give us an idea of how to live as a Christian in a secular world. Now, last election, many were disappointed. The election before that, many were disappointed. Because Christians come out on different places on a lot of issues. Now, we don't discuss the particulars of politics here. We do not support one candidate or another, but we do ask that you live Christianly. A little Jesus-y in this world. And it can be difficult if we're honest. And our responsibility, 1 Timothy 2:1 says, I urge you, first of all, to pray for all people, ask God to help them, intercede on their behalf, and give thanks for them. Pray this way for kings and all who are in authority so we can live peaceful and quiet lives marked by godliness and dignity. We have to pray for our leaders, even the ones we don't like. I challenge you, before you post something on Facebook, have you prayed for that leader? And I'm not saying pray for their condemnation and a meteor to hit them from the sky. Easy to pray for that. Some of you are praying for that right now for me. It's not that we have to be involved. We have to, vote our conscience. We have to do that stuff. But we also have to pray. Now, here's the thing. Does that mean we always have to follow what the government says? We're supposed to follow, we're supposed to pray, we're supposed to submit. I'm getting weird looks here. I love the weird looks. I have to love weird looks because some of you give me weird looks every week. Some of you don't realize. I mean, one time, I didn't realize it until I started preaching. But I have this look on my face when I find something interesting that kind of looks like this. And I didn't notice it till I went to preach, and everyone was giving me this weird face, and I'm like, oh my gosh, is that what I look like to everyone else? And so now I'm like, when I go somewhere and hear someone preach, I'm like, do you like that? I was somewhere, this guy was preaching, he said something, and I went, and then later he's talking to the pastor, he's like, yeah, Jeff gave me this weird look, and man. I had a friend who was doing this during my sermon, and I was like, what did I say wrong? He just shakes his head left to right. Anyway, what about that? Now, I want to, I got some other stuff, but Peter and John. Now, early church starts, and people are getting healed. They're pointing people to Jesus. That becomes a problem because the religious people who kind of bring Jesus before Pilate, get him crucified by the Roman government, they're not so much liking people talking about Jesus. And so they arrest him, and then in Acts chapter 4, they say, what should we do about these men? We can't deny that they performed a miraculous sign. People getting healed, and everybody in Jerusalem knows about it. But to keep them from spreading their propaganda any further, we must warn them not to speak in Jesus' name again. So they're like, okay, we can't do anything. We can't deny this miracle that's happening. People getting healed, and so you can't talk. We're going to say you can't talk in Jesus' name. And then To call the apostles back, they commanded them again never to speak in the name, speak or teach in the name of Jesus. But Peter replied, do you think God wants us to obey you rather than him? We cannot stop telling about everything we have seen and heard. And so there is a time in faith where what you are asked to do because of your faith may conflict with what the government does. Now, does anybody know what holiday is Monday? Civil disobedience. Now, I always remind people it's not just Martin Luther King. It's not just Dr. Martin Luther King, but it's the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And a lot of the civil rights stuff comes out of his faith. And we honor him. Now, if you some of you are too young, you don't even remember this. I don't even remember it. I had to read about it in Wikipedia now. But the Freedom Riders, 1961, they went to challenge segregation on buses because federal law said, can't do that. But they kind of turned a blind eye to the South and and so they actually wrote to them, said, hey, we're going to, disintegrate? We're going to be desegregated. It's harder than you think. You get up here preaching, you cannot think of a word. You just start making things up. I think I got a list somewhere of made-up words, don't I? That's where we hit things like Jesus-y. Anyway, so thank you. But to challenge the segregation, they actually sent a letter to JFK and the FBI, the people who ran the bus company, said, we're going to do this. And we want you to know when, and we want you to know why. We're willing to get arrested, but things got to change. And so you can be Christian and be civilly disobedient. Because there's a time when you have to go God's law bigger than man's law. So on the one hand, submit to authorities, pray for them. On the other hand, there's times when you got to go, this is too far. And, there's all kinds, hiding the Jewish people during World War II. Hitler and Bonhoeffer, there's a Christian leader in on an assassination plot for Hitler. It's not that, and again, we're not running assassination plots. It's like when we were still in the basement and we had that series called Revolution. I kept waiting for the ATF because we were in a basement on a Sunday morning talking about revolution, anyway. But, it's not that we always have to be like just whatever the government says. I think as a force and as a people, there's times to rise up, and that's why we honor Martin Luther King tomorrow. Those things are important. Now, but here we go. If I stop the sermon here, and I think a lot of sermons that I've heard on this passage, a lot of teachings I've heard on this, stop there. We go, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And we forget about the, render unto God what is God's. So this is part two. It's easy to focus on that first part, but we really need to give to God what is God's. Well, what is that? What does it mean? And again, we most of us don't think much about the image. We talked about the coin. No graven images. That other word, image. You think Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, 27. Anyone? We are created in the. So we've got God's image on us. And Psalm 24:1 says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. What's God's? Everything. So, yeah, give to Caesar what is he? Give Caesar back his piece of silver. What's God's? Everything. And our responsibility as people of faith is to give everything to God. Now, it's hard. We use the analogy we talked about. I kind of thought of it, I wouldn't say last week, but it was 2 weeks ago. I only work an hour a week, so, it throws me off, when I didn't have my hour last week. That's a joke if you didn't know it. I assure you there's lots to do during the week too. But There's a book called, My Heart, Christ Home. Haven't read it in years. So hopefully it's good. You can download it for free. There's like PDFs all over the internet. Hope it's not a, copywritten because you can find it anywhere. But, the idea was, different rooms in your life and, do you give God the person who wrote it did like an analogy and different, do you give God this part of your life? Give God, because most of us kind of, give God part of our life. We'll give him this part, we'll give him that part, but you have trouble giving the whole thing. And I use the analogy, I think a lot of times, a lot of struggles Christians have is giving God the bedroom, because we have sometimes, the world's perception of like things like sexuality are one thing, ours are another. I would, my wife pointed out, she's like, I think the problem is the closet. I was like, oh, that'll preach. And I think that's actually in the book. But, sometimes it's like we hide stuff, because we have parts of things we like, we kind of hide in the closet. Because, people come over, what do? You stuff everything in a closet. I mean, everyone's like home is Pinterest when they have people come over. But reality is everything got crammed in the closet. Can anyone ever cram all their stuff in a closet, in a room when they enter a party and then just lock the door and be like, yeah, I don't know why that one's locked. And so, we sometimes don't want to give everything over to God. So whose image of the coin? Give it to him. Whose image is on you? God's. And what we should give to God is everything. I know some of us don't read our email, honestly. A couple of you. I try to read my email. I just get a lot of emails, and I used to feel like I had to respond quickly to anymals, and that it took up most of my day. I'd spend my entire day, so generally I go afternoon, I read my emails. So if you're trying to get a hold of me quickly, text. But anyway, so one of the things, there's actually some bonus things if you sign up the email list. There's some things I don't send out anywhere else. You get special stuff though. So if you're one of those people who reads the email, and so I sent out an article this week, and it was talking about this thing. It says, or you can go to the website and read it there too, because all this stuff, we post the stuff that goes out on the email too. So only people who look at websites and read emails get everything. It says, but you can go ahead and post it and share it somewhere else if you prefer to be on social media. And it says, we only have so much to say into what happens to our money once it leaves our hands, which is why so much of Jesus' teaching around holding earthly possessions loosely. Jesus does talk about money. We get all nervous in the church when Jesus talks about money. Well, we get nervous when the pastor talks about money. So everyone's holding their wallet. Hallelujah, amen. Pass the plate around again. But Jesus talks a lot about it because we use money, and it's an issue. We'll talk about that later. I'm not going to tell you what week because you won't show up that week. It says, but our hands themselves and the bodies and souls that are connected to, those will have a great deal of control over and should be very concerned about how we're using something with God's image on it, with something that belongs to Him. And the way we live matters. Again, we kind of cut this passage off. Render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and God what is God's. What's God's? Everything. Our lives. Our whole selves. Romans 12:1 says it this way, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all He has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship Him. An invitation to follow Jesus is an invitation to give our whole lives over. We lead a different way. There's a men's group that meets here on most Saturdays. Like when John's on reserve weekend, we don't do it, but we have a great time, and it's really open and honest. And we've just been talking about how to maybe sometimes too open and honest. Man, we get real in there. Some of you haven't been to a real Bible study where you're real. And this one's real, but I love what we're talking about. Being like Jesus. And it's hard sometimes because you talk about giving up everything and really truly shaping your life and modeling your life after Christ is difficult at times. Because we like to hold on to things, right? We like to hold on to little things. We like this room and that room. We want to say we give it all to Jesus, but it's hard to actually do that. And it'd be interesting. Some of you need to ask, your spouse, or a friend, is there an area I'm not giving it to? And some of us know this. I remember when I was giving my life to Christ, it was like this process. I was literally like, okay, I'll give you this part. I'll give you this part. This is mine still. And it's this slow process. And you may not think of it that way as you process faith. Maybe your experience of becoming a believer may be different, but a lot of us do that in practicality, right? We hold on to things. God will give you this, but not that. I'll think this way about the way you think things, but not that. Because we naturally hold on to things. Our biggest problem isn't politics. It's our heart. Jesus' goal wasn't to become a politician. He came so that dead people might have life. Jesus offers us all life if we admit that we sin, that we fail, and then we believe in him and commit to following him with all that you are. So as the worship team comes back to play,